Good evening. It is September 4th, 2024, and this is the Comprehensive Plan Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order and also note that we do have a quorum present. First order of business tonight is the approval of the August 7th, 24 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, John. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And all those in favor? Excellent, that passes. All right, old business, and that will be a review of our second draft of the plan. I hope everyone had a chance to go over it and see the changes that we had discussed at our last meeting. I kind of figured, and Peter, I don't know how you'd like to handle it, but we could just open it up and see if anybody has questions, lingering concerns, any of that.
I think the plan looks excellent. That's my comment.
Well, I did have a number of concerns.
Okay, let's hear it.
I did communicate them with Kate. I mentioned them before, I think. One was about trying to get grant money. I said I just don't think that's a patriotic thing to do, to advance getting paid grant money. It adds inflation, it adds a cost to the taxpayers, and I don't see how that helps affordable housing. I also have a concern about the use of property in many towns. We have large house lots. And my experience with dealing with doing subdivisions, that we ultimately consume a lot of land because we have large house lots. Sometimes we have open space development, and that itself creates small woodlots that are not feasible to harvest because they're so small. You might wind up with open space of 5 or 10 forested acres, and they're just hard to manage. But to me, it would make more sense to maximize the number of houses in when someone does a subdivision, as opposed to having large house lots or these open space. That's just what I think, and that's from years of experience. I've done many subdivisions for property owners, and it's just interesting how they wind up creating a situation where they're virtually impossible to manage properly. It's a waste of a forest resource. And I think the comprehensive plan ought to look at maybe maximizing the number of houses in the subdivision, not doing these 3-acre minimums and all that sort of thing. What else did I? Taxation is an issue. At one time I mentioned that we ought to understand why people own forest land or open space and why they sell it. And a lot of clients I deal with that own forest property, they're older, they purchased their land many years ago, and when they pay their taxes, they pay a capital gains on the timber that they sell. But the capital gains is based on the value it was when they purchased the land. And over time, that value goes down because of inflation, so the tax they pay against the value of the timber winds up being pretty high. And I know the taxes that kind of tax isn't dictated by us, but in the state of Maine, we have 8% capital gains tax, and the feds is 20%. So that's 28% of the capital gain on the timber sale. And the older people, when they determine how much, I'm not going to explain this well, but when they determine how much tax they'll pay, it's based on the amount of timber they sell, its value, and if the value has been depleted over time, they can't use that to keep their taxes at a reasonable rate. I don't know, John, if you've experienced that, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly tax consequences with timber harvest for sure, especially if you're in tree growth, or if you take land out of tree growth. But maybe, Greg, there's some things we could add, tweak in the plan that would address those concerns of yours relative to forest, more favorable forest treatment of large tract forest owners.
Yeah, these forest landowners, you pay a tax every year, you pay a property tax. You don't get income from your timber every year.
Right.
And so, and I'm telling you this because I think that makes a situation for someone who might want to hold on to land for long-term use. I think it makes it more difficult for them to do that.
Greg, are you referring to those who are not in like a tree growth program?
It could be either one, really.
Okay, because you are getting some sort of tax break from the town in a way from being in tree growth. You have a reduced tax.
Oh, yeah, but the tree growth tax system is interesting as well. There are more people that don't have land in tree growth because they know what the penalties would be if they take it out, and their long-term thinking is, I don't want to jeopardize the potential of using it for another use and pay the hefty tax to take it out, the penalty, and they can be significant.
Yeah.
Depending on where you live, the
right.
town, whether it's got power in front of it, all kinds of these things, so.
Yeah.
But that's a concern of mine when it comes to open space. Everything we've talked about has more to do with, I don't know, regulating people harder. And I think we ought to be looking at something different. And some of this wouldn't be an issue at town level. It might be at state level or even the federal level.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Unfortunately, the taxation isn't something that we have any control over. And then the maximizing subdivisions, is there a particular language? I think that is also is that a planning board decision on zoning, or is that a zoning board? Do I have that flip-flopped?
Can I ask a question related to
Sure.
that? So Raymond has open space subdivision standards. It's been a long time since I've looked at them. I don't know. But in most towns that allows you to sort of get additional, to sort of cluster the housing in one area and preserve.
Yep.
So, if it seems like that's not, maybe those standards aren't as effective as they could be. Is that kind of what you're saying, Greg? Is that like you should be allowed to cluster more housing and then preserve larger tracts of land?
I can't prove this in any way, but I think if you took a piece of property and you were allowed to put as many houses as you can in it without creating any open space, that you might save another woodlot somewhere down the road from being developed, because there's only so many houses people want to buy. But the way we're doing it now, it's, my colleagues, other foresters, Rennie, my dad, we've experienced this where we just see land get chewed up a lot faster than if you could just, have 1 or 2 acre house lots, this doesn't sound good, just fill a lot up with houses, and maybe we'd be spared the next woodlot from being subdivided.
So there is a tool, sort of, for doing that, which is called Transfer of Development Rights, or TDR. The town of Gorham has used this really effectively, and basically it's more complicated than this, but the very simplified version is that you identify places where you want to see housing, and you identify places where you want to encourage, large tracts of forest to remain forest. And then the person, this is one of those things that's harder to explain than it is to understand, but basically the person, you can buy someone's development rights, right? So like if I own 20 acres of forest, I can sell those development rights to someone so they can then build more housing on a parcel in the growth area, and then in exchange my parcel doesn't get developed. Does that make sense?
Oh,
This is
I've
Gorham.
heard of that.
Gorham does it successfully.
Gorham uses this a lot.
So
It can be complicated to administer, because, as it shows, I have a hard time explaining it, but it is like a very well-established tool that allows you to kind of to basically what Greg is saying, use up a parcel in one area in exchange for keeping large blocks of habitat.
But I guess the other part of that is, Greg, you're saying we're not in your mind, doing enough to encourage keeping this land undeveloped? Right, everything is pushing in one direction that's
Yeah, I think house lot.
making it harder and harder to
I
keep
think-
these large tracts of land.
The little development right here in town, behind the shopping center, I don't see anything wrong with that. There's, houses are close to each other, and they got a few trees scattered between them, and I just don't see why a woodlot can't be used that way. And you compare that to going across the street out behind, well, the vets on Route 302, that it's a fully stocked forest. It's got houses scattered all through it, and it's a resource that you really can't use. You just can't go and convince a bunch of landowners to thin their woods or even harvest their trees, and they're just going to grow up. And I've witnessed this many times. They actually become liabilities. You got to pay someone to go in and remove the trees using cranes and things like that. And I don't know. I see it a little differently when it comes to large house lots and utilizing or not maximizing the utilization of a property for I know people don't like housing develops. They don't like seeing more houses, but what I see, I think, is worse. So that's my humble opinion.
I think we could definitely, I'm looking at the draft future land use plan, and in the rural areas, we talk about all new housing here should follow open space subdivision standards. And we can add a little language in there to add in the clustering of housing or higher densities of housing to promote leaving undisturbed land undisturbed, if that's something the committee is interested in. I think we could also, I think Sam is reading your subdivision ordinance right now, and we could also add in a goal or an action to, the comp plan doesn't really we're not going to change zoning in the comp plan, but we could add in an action to review or amend, if necessary, the open space subdivision standards to encourage denser housing, which, like Greg said, when you encourage denser housing, you have the benefit of preserving more habitat blocks and forest blocks kind of contiguous to each other.
I think it would be a good idea, anyway, to direct these things to be reviewed anyway. I don't see the harm in adding it as a goal that whatever responsible party that be, I don't know if it's the planning board or zoning board. I don't even know if there is a zoning board. But
Appeals.
yeah, there's an appeal. So planning board, that they review these things, study them, look at them. I don't see, I think
That's all I'm asking for,
Yeah.
is we take a little different approach to this. I feel like I'm the only guy that believes in this stuff, that we're destroying another resource at the same time trying to think we're protecting the lakes. And
I think it's worthy of
I don't
review of
expect-
anything to see if there's a better way that it can be done. Well,
I mean, our current plan to have rural area, which is probably the biggest area of town, and the current zoning is rural residential and rural, right, for the large parts of town.
yeah,
And the rural residential, and the rural part, it occupies a significantly larger area than the rural residential. I may be wrong on that, but it's a substantial portion. And in terms of encouraging, the larger woodlots are, I'm guessing mostly, there are a number of large woodlots on the rural zone Raymond as we know it now, which the current plan is not seeking to adjust those boundaries too terribly much. Am I wrong on that? From what they are now?
No,
I mean,
they're not changing. No.
Shoreland zone stays where it is, village, all that stays
Yep.
where it is. Rural residential boundaries we aren't proposing to change those so much. But it seems like, Greg, that I would think most of most of your larger forest activity projects would be happening in the rural part of Raymond. Maybe that's,
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
Peter, I know you have something to say. Jackie, I know you also. Peter, go first.
Yeah, I guess to Kayla's point, and what I'd say to Greg is basically, and this has been my experience on other committees. Take for example, a school board. What they have is a regular schedule for review of major policies. And I don't think it would be outside of the purview of this committee to say in the plan that what we'd like to see of the major committees within the town, whether it be the select board or it be the planning board, that what they do is set up a schedule for regular reviews. And that would kind of then allow for discussion, public comment, and suggestions as to where things may be changed. So that might be something that could be incorporated into the plan, so that there be a regular request or a requirement that there be some sort of a schedule posted for regular review of major policies and ordinances. I think the other thing, just to mention a couple of things that Greg said, I believe what our data showed is that since the 2000, at least until the 2004 comprehensive plan, the building in this town has primarily or overwhelmingly been single-family homes on large lots. And certainly that might be something to look at again, because it hasn't changed, and it would allow for at least some opportunity to look at more in the way of density, and where we could practically increase density and then preserve open space. And in some respects, and I know Kate mentioned that word that I cringe now when I hear it, a growth area. But in the growth areas, obviously through legislation recently, density was increased within the state in all growth areas based on the recent legislation. So that's been addressed, but it's addressed in the designated growth areas as far as being able to put more structures on smaller parcels of land. And just lastly, I believe we got the message from collecting the data on grants. And I don't disagree at all with Greg as far as saying that, it's great to say grants, but the bottom line is, where does that money come from? And I agree wholeheartedly with him. It comes from the taxpayer. That's where that money comes from. It doesn't get printed somewhere, or it doesn't come from a magic pot. It basically comes from everybody's taxes. That being said, the message I got from the community was more or less that they want to see us looking more at grants. And while I am conscious as a citizen of the country as to what's happening, on the federal level and even what's happening on the state level, I'm going to kind of be a little selfish here and say, this is Raymond's plan. And if Raymond can benefit by getting some support from the state or federal government in order to achieve the goals of this plan, I believe I would endorse that. I believe the plan should endorse that. And I believe what we've heard from the public is that they endorse that as well.
Just real quick to add to that, Peter, it was also something that when we did our department head interviews that was talked about a lot, was having a staff member that could spend more time with grants. So I think that where we're coming from that is the feedback. And again, it's not exactly our plan per se, but the community's plan. Sorry, Jackie.
I was just going to say that other benefits from what Greg was mentioning is that, these sort of cluster type developments will create, I think, more sense of community within the town, and that's something that we've seen echoed over and over again in from feedback from the citizens. And if we're looking at these village zone type areas, perhaps driving some of those more densely clustered development near those areas where there may be sidewalks, maybe sidewalks can be part of development plans, maybe there can be sort of incentives or TIFs or something like that that would encourage the development to create spaces that are more pedestrian friendly and more, drive people to a more community feel. Where as if you're, everybody has their own 3-acre lot, you're all very independent of one another, so.
I wouldn't like to see Greg's idea lost in the shuffle. I think it's something that really needs to be explored, and say something about what Jackie has said. If this area is going to be a new village area, wouldn't it make sense that the rural sections that surround this could use that type of development? I know if you look at the developments taking place on Tenny Hill, I can remember where there were no houses up there, and that's not that long ago, and now there's 60-plus houses up there. But the problem is, they're all on 3-acre lots, and neighbors don't get to know neighbors. If you're 3 acres away, you don't know your neighbor. I would almost bet that most people who live on that road really don't know their neighbors. And the reason is there's no proximity. And I think we need more proximity. Jackie is saying, you build community, you have to get to know who your neighbors are. And probably if it was in a development in which there were sidewalks and people could get around by walking on sidewalks, they'd meet their neighbors more often and become a community. So I wouldn't want to lose what Greg is saying we should be looking at, because I think it can make a difference if, in fact, we are going to build this into a village area.
Kate, do you have a good suggestion on where we can put a goal of review of all major policies and ordinances by major committees?
Yeah, so for the, I think there's one thing that I did think of is most of the state goals include a goal that says to review your land use ordinances. So we can either build on that or call it out, make it more specific, or we can have an additional local goal. It doesn't really matter either way, because I know those state goals tend to kind of get buried because there's so many of them. So if anyone has any thoughts on if you want to have a separate local goal or a state goal, I do think we should add, and I'm not sure exactly what heading it comes under yet, but we should add a local goal to review rural residential zoning and open space subdivision standards to encourage, clustering of housing where possible to preserve more blocks of forest or habitat. I think those should be that should be a distinct goal, because that's kind of an actionable, zoning review, ordinance change kind of thing that a board would have to go through.
Which goal? Shall we add that to?
Yeah, I guess
I've been poring over them, trying to find a nice little place to tuck it in.
we could put it under conserving Raymond's most important natural resources for the open space subdivision and rural zoning. I think that really ties in there.
Or is there something in the goal about community connections and things that could focus on more, encourage developers with cluster style developments that might encourage, or that might include community resources such as sidewalks and public space and common areas?
Yeah, I think that also makes sense. Like I said, I haven't recently looked at the subdivision ordinance, but so sidewalks are probably not required at all now. So we could have in there like review Raymond's subdivision standards to set kind of a threshold for when community amenities like sidewalks need to be implemented. So some towns have like, if it's 10 lots or more, you need to build a sidewalk, things like that.
Sidewalks are a lot easier to put in beforehand than they are afterhand, like on Main Street.
Yeah. So we could put that goal under the create more opportunities for community connection. And then we could put something under natural resources for the review of open space subdivision and rural zoning standards. Does that work?
I think that sounds like it makes sense. And it seems, Greg, that it would have to be really on a case-by-case, a lot-by-lot project. It's a flag, a yellow sticky for the planning board to look at. Here comes a 40-lot, 40-acre parcel subdivision. They want to put 20 acres aside, or 15 for open space, and push all the houses in the rest of the corner. There's still some value, even though there may not be a forest harvest value there. There's probably some other natural resource benefits that come from having 15 of those acres undeveloped. There might be some wetlands, sensitive wetlands in there and other habitats or whatever. But the action item will really be for this to be on the planning board's menu, to be thoughtful about how they can respond to proposals that don't overconsume viable tracts of land for forest harvest. So I'm kind of hearing it as more of a kind of lot, parcel by parcel thing, rather than something we can really resolve by a whole, zoning district-wide approach.
Yeah. No, I think anything,
Anything
if
to
we
put more
look
thought
at
to it.
any other ideas other than, we've done a number of subdivisions and we've wound up with, 5, 6, 8 acres of open space, and it's all generated out of the lot size, the total size of the parcel to begin with, and those just aren't manageable.
But that's not useful. So maybe there's a minimum that an open space subdivision can set aside, like, pick a number, 10 acres. I mean, what's the minimum on tree growth? 10 acres?
10.
Yeah, it takes.
So let's not approve subdivisions that have 9 acres of open space, or let's be thoughtful about how we do it, I think is the action.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
definitely this is something that we should be setting a goal for the planning board, as part of their yearly, or however often it would be, review of policies.
Yeah.
Yep, we will add some goals in there, and I think when you next get a draft from us, we'll highlight what has changed, because when we send you our next draft, it's going to be formatted too, so it will look different. So we will highlight what's changed since the last one. Do you want us to add anything in about exploring other programs like a transfer of development rights program?
I don't like them, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't.
I mean, I guess I was kind of assuming that would just be something that a planning board would be looking at all the options, or if
Okay.
someone said, hey, what about this option? I don't know.
Yeah, we can write a goal that structures it in a way that is like, I think there needs to be a discrete goal for reviewing the subdivision and open space subdivision standards, but then there can be something that's more generally
More
review
vague.
ordinances and, potential programs that could support this, such as that.
Such as that, yeah.
Yep.
Yep,
That's
I
good.
like that idea.
Good.
Is there a goal specifically for the growth areas in how they're designed?
I don't, let me see. I don't know if we did. We did include reviewing the current design guidelines and amending zoning to allow small-scale mixed-use development in the villages.
Because I think, to Greg's point, if you kind of consolidate density in one area, like the growth areas are supposed to be, even at the new LD 2003 density, we're still going to end up with relatively large lots and houses. And I guess if the point of that village growth area is to have like your classic New England town with your like Main Street and your stores and people are parking and grabbing coffee and walking, and you've got, 20 different stores that you can all walk to and you only park once, I don't know that that's actually allowed under our current zoning. Like, I don't know that we could actually build that. And so I think if we are going to ask the planning board to look at things, I think highlighting those growth areas for, I don't know, a master plan essentially, or something, to have them look at that, I think that would be worth our while. Because it'd be a shame to just have a bunch of single-family homes in these growth areas and that would be it.
So I think another thing we can touch on here is, so under the state's required future land use goals, they have the action to, using the descriptions provided in the future land use plan and narrative, maintain, enact, or amend local ordinances as appropriate. So that's a very vague way to say, do what you said you were going to do in your future land use plan.
Mm-hmm.
We can add some more local goals to that future land use section, which could include what we've just been talking about, as well as what you're talking about now, John. If you want to do that, to be more specific about the steps to take in terms of future land use beyond what we've already highlighted.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that. I'd be in
Okay.
favor of using the state mandated guidelines to incorporate that in, because I think what it also does is gives a little bit more authority to it.
Yeah, I think we can add some. So I think so that is the other option, is we can, the things you're just talking about, those can all really fall under future land use, if that makes sense to people.
Good.
Sounds like we're in agreement over this.
Okay, great. And I think, John, what you were saying, we can, where's the goal about 302 master plan? I guess so that we have a 302 master plan. I guess I personally try to avoid too many plans to plan in these.
Agreed, yeah.
So I hesitate to do something like, we need a village master plan. But we could put that in there, or we could put something into just specifically say amend local zoning ordinances to allow the type of traditional New England village development, described in the future land use plan.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we'll add some local goals to the future land use section. I think that will kind of call this out a little more specifically.
All right. Any other comments, concerns? I'm not seeing any. Okay. I just have one, because I didn't go back and look. Did we decide on the introduction that we began in the spring of 2023, or did we begin in August of 2022? I didn't look back. I don't know what we decided
I
on.
believe it was August 2022.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
That was our.
that's right. That was our
August
first
Sam in the introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what was our other?
You said spring of 2023, and I thought, oh, well, maybe we decided on something different.
Did we say 2023 on accident?
The spring of 2023, but it really should be, we were appointed in
Okay, yeah, so
Our
I think
first
in the new
June.
draft,
Our first meeting was August of
August.
2022.
yeah, we updated
Right.
to August 22 in here.
Yeah.
We did have,
Okay, because it says second draft. Am I
Oh,
looking
is
at the
it?
wrong thing?
I don't know.
That's not in acknowledgements, it's in introduction.
Oh, you caught it. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
an introduction.
I was thinking,
Thank
I
you.
must be going nuts. All right.
We had one, speaking of the introduction, we were reviewing notes from the last meeting. Who is Brad McCurtain?
Oh.
What category is he under in acknowledgement?
So I actually had another point to that. I didn't really like former committee member, and I know this is kind of nitpicky. I would like to put June of 2022 to, I think it was April of 2023, in the parentheses instead of former committee member, to acknowledge the time frame, as opposed to former. I just,
Yeah, I didn't
Good
like the
idea.
idea of the former either.
We just
I-
didn't really know who he was.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so he was a member of the committee who resigned. What I would say is that I was envisioning it more as, not listed under committee, but for both the former town manager and the former member of the, that we just acknowledged their help on the plan, and not really lump them into any one category other than just an acknowledgement of their help.
I had the same question mark with Don Willard.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this idea of the former, I'd rather call out a date that they helped or served.
We could do that, or
Or-
just a general acknowledgement.
Or
Thanks for
some
their
sort
help.
of acknowledgement, for their help as well. I don't care either way how that's handled. Is there a preference?
I think I'm mentioning both of them at the, like, under.
A thank you to the members who helped and also to
I like the
Brad.
times.
Yeah.
I
You
like
like
the
the
dates.
times?
I like the dates.
Yep, dates are good.
So leave them in there, but add the dates.
I mean, Brad was a committee member.
Yeah,
From the time, I mean, that's why I kind of like the date idea.
sure.
Because it acknowledged the fact that
So I believe in the timeline that I presented, it gives the date when the select board reduced the size of the committee.
reduction in the comprehensive plan committee membership, I saw that, and that's where I got my April from.
In April.
So in April, so I figured June
August
to
to April.
April, or, because we were technically appointed
Yes.
in June
22.
of
Yeah.
22. So if we can change the former for Brad to June of 2022 to April 23, and then possibly the same for Don Willard, that he was a contributing member of town staff from June 2022 to May? June, okay, to June, to 23?
That was when he went out on FMLA.
We
Okay,
can also,
that makes sense. Yep.
You know, we did just, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. We just had a town where the town manager retired during the comp plan, and I'm trying to look at what we wrote.
Yeah, if you have any other suggestion, that'd be great. I just didn't, for both of them, I just didn't like the former.
Well,
Yeah, so we had, in another town, we said the comp plan team would like to acknowledge the service of town manager Nathaniel Tupper, who recently retired after X number of years of service to the town. So we could also put something like that in there, because Don was here a long time, if you think that would be appropriate.
do we want to have something for Chris Hansen as well? I know he was here at the beginning. I know he hasn't been here recently, but
He is mentioned in town staff.
he is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
He's still helping us in the background.
Okay, great.
He was,
He must have had something come up. He told me he intended to be in on Zoom tonight.
No problem.
Do you want to have just a one sentence acknowledgement for Don, or?
again, I'm completely
Okay.
impartial to that idea. I don't know if there's a consensus, whether we just want to do the dates or an actual sentence.
I don't feel strongly about it.
Let's just stay with the dates.
Okay.
It just keeps it even, I guess. That's okay with everybody else.
Yep.
Good.
Did you get those dates down?
That was, one more small thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
The introduction,
Yep.
the second sentence, the plan effort builds upon the past planning efforts. I just want to take out the first effort.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
plan builds upon, that's all,
Yep.
that's all I have. So I think that there are no other concerns, okay. So do we need to, formally accept this in any way? Or we're just saying
we'll do
this is
that.
good?
So I think that will be, I just want to point out also for Sue's benefit, Sue did send us some very minor edits. Those will be reflected in the next draft. So I think you can do that at the next meeting, we're gonna bring you a formatted draft where all these changes have been reflected. It will have lots of pictures in it. That will be the point at which you can take a vote to, make this public, and we can determine the actual public comment period and start to think about a date for a public hearing.
Okay, all right. Well then, I guess Peter.
And Kate, would the committee be getting that in advance of the next meeting?
Probably 1 week out. like usual. And I will try to make sure we note where changes were made, so you don't have to read the entire thing.
Okay. All right. All right. I think we can move on. All right, new business. Select board workshop recap. So that was last week. I would like to thank town staff for their enormous effort of basically moving the broadcast studio to the Jordan Small Middle School gym. It was a wonderful setup, and I appreciate all the work and effort that was put into that. Peter and I were there, as was Jackie, Sean,
Frank?
you and Frank was also there, sorry. I thought there was a few citizens in attendance. There was also, I would say, members from just about every committee, one or two members from every committee in the town, for the most part, major committees anyway. I'm relatively happy. I think that Peter and I had discussed sort of our goal, and our goal for this was to make sure that the people who would be carrying on the torch had an idea of what's been put in thus far, where we're at, and maybe get a glimpse of what their responsibilities may or may not be after the fact. But I was happy with it. Peter, do you have any comments?
Yeah, Kayla, I think that a couple of things. We after that workshop ended, Kayla and I both had a nice conversation with a representative from the planning board, and he was very appreciative of the information that was provided. Complimented this committee on the amount of work that we've done. He had one ask that I thought was important. I believe Kayla did as well, and that was that and Kayla summarized it very well at the end. That basically this committee has just about finished its work, and so really the work now goes to the committees within town, the leadership of the town, and the citizens in general that are interested in this plan to have it go forward in the implementation phase. The planning board member was very clear, though, saying, please, before you wrap up your work, just make sure that you've made it as clear as possible for us on the planning board to see exactly what it is that this plan is hoping to achieve over the next 10 to 20 years. And we have discussed that to some point in this committee. The fact that the implementation phase is easily as difficult, if not more difficult, than what we've just done over the last 24 months. So that was, I thought, an important ask. So I just would reinforce that with everybody in this committee, that what we really need to do, along with North Star's help, is to really crystallize as much as possible the direction that we've basically been informed by the community as to where the Raymond should be going over the next 10 to 20 years. Otherwise, like I say, I'm someone who's basically always expecting more in the way of public participation. It's probably an over-expectation on my part, but the process has tempered that a little bit myself. That being said, I will tell you that I was hopeful that there would be more in the way of interaction between the number of people there from the committee, from town leadership, as far as their thoughts or ideas going forward. We got some, but once again, I'm probably never going to be satisfied that it was enough. But I did get a sense from a number of the individuals that were up there on that panel that represent the town that they were interested. To varying degrees. I believe that we started off by asking or polling the individuals up at the table there from the committees, boards, leadership, and the like. How many of them just raise your hand, how many of you are familiar with the website and about half of the hands went up, which I have to be satisfied with. I wouldn't totally be satisfied unless everyone raised their hand. But once again, that's my own problem, and I think that overall we achieved what we were attempting to achieve, which is to make sure that those individuals involved with the town are familiar with what we've done, and once again, the ask being that now they need to take the torch and go forward with it.
I did get a comment. It was the same comment. One was from a committee member, and one was from the same comment was from a just a citizen. And they said that was a really good meeting, and they wish that more people had attended. And they asked me what we can do, if anything, to get the notice out there a little bit better, because they both said that was an excellent meeting. I wish that more people had attended.
I know that one of the comments was communication from one of the citizens that, we don't know what's happening. I think that's really hard, because you put it out there, it's in the paper, it's on boards, it's broadcast out. I just don't, outside of knocking on people's doors personally and saying, hey, did you hear about this? I'm just not sure how one reaches people more. I mean, I think, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how, when you already are, I think, trying your hardest to put things out there in a format that citizens might utilize. I mean, I don't know if it went on. I don't know what our...
On Facebook.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how else you do that. I don't know how else you get it across. And I hate to do this, but honestly, I feel like the onus is on the citizens. That if you want to be involved, then you need to check. Because I don't know how else, even as a committee, as a town, can communicate anymore. I don't know if it's an airplane with a sign going across, I don't know.
I just say, Caleb, my experience has been that it's, when I see the most response from the community is when it's something that's controversial. So if all of a sudden someone is proposing a zoning change down on 302 where people have houses, all of a sudden you see a lot of activity. If you're talking about building a solar farm next to a residential area,
you know what? Broadcast studio.
There you go. All of a sudden you've got that response. So I have to take it that a lot of what we were doing or discussing is not, I'm going to assume, was not that controversial, and it doesn't bring people out.
They're not as interested. Frank?
I think we lost that communication in town when we lost the dump. When people went to the, seriously, when people went to the dump on Saturday, they talked town business.
That's true.
And we don't have a dump. There's no place for people to get together and talk town business. That's the whole idea of community. 90% of Raymond does not have community.
I
They really don't. And without community, you don't get a dialogue about what's happening in town.
So even, and I know Sue, you must want to talk, that we had that summer survey that we were hounding people and handing out cards. We had a better success rate with our pom-pom surveys. I mean, because we met them where they were. We were right in their face. So again, I think in general, public participation in events that they are not directly affecting them in that moment just are not that interesting and worthy of missing your, I don't know, favorite nighttime show or eating dinner with your family. I mean, right? I mean, that's when all this happens. So I know that's a comment, is how do we get it out there? You're right. Will we ever be satisfied with the participation that we're getting? No, probably not. I think that's just the nature of this. Now, Sue.
Well, I just have an anecdotal little fun fact. There are a whopping 4 people watching us on YouTube. Hi, guys. But that's all we have right now on YouTube is 4.
And along with that, Sue, I guess what I'd say is that however I did get to view today that workshop in its entirety. And so what we
Yeah,
can
it's
do
out
is
there.
certainly promote as much as possible that people just have to go to IPTV and, on the Raymond website, and they can watch the entire 2 hours, or they can scroll to just a particular place that they want to, and at their leisure, they can look at it.
And it's commercial free.
Sorry, you can go.
Sean?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to point out, at the next meeting, we'll talk a little bit about getting the word out about the public comment period, but we can choose to have this public comment period include Election Day. And I have a suspicion that this is going to be a fairly popular Election Day. So just keep that in mind, that we do have a really good opportunity when a lot of people from Raymond will be in one place during this public comment period.
Thank you.
Kayla, did you keep the pom-poms?
Do you like the plan?
Do you like the plan? I do have all those pom-poms. They have not been donated yet.
What would the questions be? We've asked them a couple times now, and would it be as simple as, are you prepared to vote in favor of adopting the comprehensive plan in, what is it going to be?
I was thinking more informational than polling people. But
Well,
we can
like
talk
have
about
the plan available for
it. We can
preview.
even have some
Is that
like
what you-
print. Yeah, we could have
Some hard copy.
like hard copies to look through.
Yeah, a link to the online, links to
And
the online
links.
version, so we can, maybe if people can table it, or just have big signs up being like, "Hey, comprehensive plan, don't miss
Maybe
it."
if we gave them, like, even on pieces of paper, like, here's where you go. Like,
Exactly.
hand it out to them. Here's where you go
Well,
to
that's what
view the
those
plan.
cards are.
Yeah,
And we can use that same QR code.
we can use the QR code. We can use the business
Oh, we
cards.
can use the same
Yeah.
cards
The-
and just shape.
And
okay.
it'll just be the main link on the website, so we can use that. We can have the other thing we could do is have something where it's like maybe 8.5 by 11 half page, so it's easy to print out, where you can hand it to someone being like, here's what the comprehensive plan is, and you have from X date until X date to comment on it.
I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
We
And
should
one
capitalize
page.
on that.
Yeah, like an
Eight
infographic,
bullet
sort of
thing.
Yeah.
pretty colorful with a QR code.
We should end it with, and we're going to vote on this next year,
Yeah.
and we need you.
This is an important vote.
We need to close this loop.
Yeah.
And the election's going to be our first time to say, now,
Raymond needs you.
Raymond needs you.
Let them know when we're having the meeting.
Right.
to-
If we could get the
For the
meeting.
public comment.
If we
We
could get
offer
the
a
meeting on
prize,
calendar.
$100 at that meeting. If you're there, you have a chance to win $100. Especially if it's around Christmas time.
What's
Nobody
left in our
wants
budget?
We could
$100.
all throw in $100.
Do we have enough discretionary funds in our budget? for-
No. In a spirit, no, we don't.
We put in $10 apiece. We can come close.
All right.
Real quick, before we move on for that.
Oh, yeah.
So not to answer the question, but your question was, how do we get people more involved? And you're right, it is on the citizens, but each one of us, if we just told a couple people about it, I think November is going to be an awesome time. It's going to reach it, but if a couple people hear about it from us, it will spread like wildfire about what's going on. And I know we're kind of wrapping up our time here, and but yeah, tell a friend and tell a family member.
And part of the message is that the real rubber is going to be implementing it, and that committee needs to be built.
I think if you had, I don't know, November, if we talk about building the committee as part of that, I think that a couple people might get
Here's what
involved.
we did, now it needs to be built and implemented.
How is this implemented kind of thing? Now,
Yeah.
what's next?
Next
Mhm.
steps.
Yeah.
Do you want to be on it?
Yeah. Invite people on.
CompPlan is hiring.
Pays really good.
Okay. All right. Next on our agenda is to review the first draft of goals, policies, and actions. We did not go through that in our August meeting. I really don't have much to comment on them, as they are basically a reflection, personally, of the goals that we've already reviewed and looked at. I think my biggest concern is that, again, we're passing the torch, so the responsible party column, that's been reviewed by town staff, that this all makes sense. I mean, that's my I guess that's my biggest concern, is that this is reviewed by the appropriate people to make sure that it makes these responsible parties are appropriate. But other than that, I personally am okay with these. So I will do the same thing where we just sort of open it up. I'm not as organized as Peter, but I did look. There were no comments, so I couldn't collect any.
Peter sent us some comments in
okay.
a spreadsheet. I'm going to try and join the Zoom so I can share my screen so
Okay.
we can all look at it.
When I looked, was it this morning? I did not see any posted
yeah,
comments, so I was like, well, you must be good.
Hold on, am I in the wrong meeting?
While we're waiting for that, does anybody have comments, questions, concerns?
I have one comment that someone had mentioned to me recently. They live on Cape Road, and they had, this may be a vicious rumor, but they had thought that at some point Fry Island had said that they would contribute to some level of development along Cape Road as far as sidewalks or parking or for the ferry, because so many people use Cape Road to get to Fry Island. I don't know if that's accurate, but perhaps on section 4, we've got a goal that says build a trail or sidewalk that spans the length of Raymond Cape Road and explore contribution opportunities to add to see if it is indeed something that is hiding, a fund that is hiding that we could tap into.
Okay, I have not heard that rumor.
Nope.
Oh.
That's a good thing, get Fry Island involved in funding. I'd add that there's a tremendous amount of information in this 20-pager here. And I'm wondering if for digestion purposes, it could be perhaps collapsed to the priority ones first. I don't want to lose, obviously, the medium and lower priority tasks, but just so that it's absorbable and not too much information, and the top priorities are right in front of the reader.
You mean so reorganizing it from highest to lowest?
High to low.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, sorry, we're having some technical difficulties with the Zoom, but let me see, what did we do here?
Are these come from state requirements?
Yes.
Yep.
They come from the state. They have to be in there with a responsible party and time frame for the plan to get approved.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we had kind of highlighted the priority goals in the narrative and then did the same here. We could move those to the top in their section in the spreadsheet, if that makes sense. Do people like that idea?
Do we have a preference on putting the priority items up higher on their perspective section?
Is it going to be in this format in the plan?
It will not be a spreadsheet like this. It will look a lot better.
Okay. But I didn't know if color coding would be high
Colors would help,
priorities
yeah.
there.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, so we can have these be a different color or have them at the top or both.
Is it too redundant to have a separate section which is just all the priority ones and then have another section that's every single one?
Yeah, we could also pull it out to have like a sort of one page at the beginning of the, I think in the plan implementation section we, okay, sorry, I'm looking at the plan. The Raymond's goals, we could, we describe that each goal has a highlighted priority action item, and we could have like almost a whole page or like half a page where we say like, here are the 5 priority action items. just like right after that. So they're right at the top, right in the beginning of the plan. You know, the goals spreadsheet is something that is really going to be more used by the implementation committee and town staff. The average person is probably not
Gonna go there.
going to read the whole thing. So that might be a good way to pull them out, is to have either a page or half page kind of graphic where it just has those 5 priority goals.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I think the implementation committee's first question is going to be, what do we do? What's important? And so I figure if we can lay that out for them, these are the top 5 things. That makes sense.
Peter?
Yeah, I did have a conversation with Kate because I had made about 20 edits to the goals and policies and the like. But I believe that the confusion was the fact I was doing it after the fact, because the first draft, I believe, is what we're looking at right now. So we were, since we had not yet reviewed the first draft, to be quite honest with you, I saw maybe a half dozen edits to the first draft. And so it seemed pretty sparse to me. And then I went back and went item by item and added another 20 edits myself. And I believe that document is a little bit more in detail, and it was more of my attempt to provide as much detail to the implementation committee as possible based on the conversation that we had last week with the planning board. So I'll just give you an example of one of the edits. We've got a time frame there. But it would make sense that in order to facilitate implementation in a timely manner, that we actually have, let's say, an actual time frame. So 1 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years, plus 5 years. And actually, in looking at some of the, I believe it was Gray that was done by North Star, they actually, when they had put together their goals, they actually had that same type of a format where they actually made a time frame in actual years. So I think that that would be one way to give guidance to the implementation committee that, you know, when we talk about its medium or its long range or whatever, what does that mean exactly? Well, it doesn't mean another 20 years. It means if it's long range, it's maybe more than 5 years. But if it's a immediacy or whatever, then it's within the next 12 months or stuff like that or whatever. So that's just one of the edits that I made in going forward with that. I would think that might fall in the area of a priority. I think some other things were more detailed, such as if we're going to, thank you. If we're going to address, and I like the term traffic quieting, then something as simple as, you know, what the town should consider immediately is purchasing some solar-driven radar displays that can be placed strategically in the town. And my understanding and research in these things is we're talking maybe $3,000-$5,000. We're not talking about a huge amount of expenditure, but by the same token, you can get better ones that actually collect data. So this would be something that we could use to go to MDOT and say, you know, we're not waiting for you to put the little lines across the road. What we've got strategically data that says that, you know, on Egypt Road, the average speed is 60 miles an hour. What are you going to do about it? So I'm just making those references as we're looking at these goals and strategies, that we be as detailed as possible, because I believe that's what the implementation committee is going to be looking for.
So should we go through, Peter, the proposed edits? Because I think they were too specific for us to just say, like, okay, we'll add that in. I think, you know, do we want to do that as a committee, or?
I guess it's what the appetite of the committee is.
So I really like the idea of giving a more specific time frame. So I think that's something we can just decide on right now, and get that one out of the way, and then we can look at the edits.
Yeah, I think I did that in the second draft. I just took that one on board. So I think I wrote short term 1 to 2 years, medium term 2 to 5 years, and long term 5+ years.
I'm okay with that.
Does everybody else like that idea of 1 to 2 years, 2 to 4, long-term, 5+ year?
I think those are good.
It's just a 3 right there.
I want things to happen sooner, 6 months.
Ongoing is
What was
the
the
other
short
option.
term? Was there an immediate? I like that one of 12 months. Was that one?
So short-term is proposed as 1 to 2 years, medium is 2 to 4, long-term would be 5+ years.
Can we do 5 to 10, just so people don't think they have another
Yeah,
20
forever.
years to do it?
It's good. Cap.
Okay, yep.
And then we have the priority actions, which are mentioned as basically the things that should start work immediately once this is passed.
And this might be a dumb question, but the time frame, that is when it's completed, not when it should be started. Is that fair
I mean,
to
it's
say?
a little tricky because some of these things could, if you're gonna say a 302 master plan, that's a priority action. But if you start talking about that in June of next year when this comp plan is passed, you have to wait and you have to talk to DOT, find out when the next funding opportunity is, get and then usually a consultant team, an engineering firm, so that can take over a year just to get that immediate project to start.
Yeah, I was sensitive to the fact that I'm sure the implementation team will be asking for as much detail as possible we can provide. We also don't want to handcuff them by making it too stringent. What I personally am trying to avoid is the fact that when I went back originally and looked at the 2004 plan, and then the implementation committee in 2010 issued their report, at that point in time, I think it was less than 30% of the high priorities had been addressed. And that was going into the first decade of the 20-year cycle. And I believe to this date, if you go online and you look at that, there are still many high priorities that were never implemented. And so I think what we have to be is reasonable enough to say, some of these things are going to take some time. But we want to have some definition so that a regular citizen in town can say, hey, to the implementation committee, this was a high priority. It was supposed to be done in the first year or two, and we're 3 years into it. What have you done? And I think that was my goal.
I'd also suggest that the committee make a report to the town every year in the town report as to what has been accomplished and what's going to happen over the coming year.
Sure, and Frank, I don't think we on this plan committee dictate that, but we can
suggest it.
We can certainly suggest it.
Yeah, I think we have that in the implementation plan to report every year.
In red ink.
Do we have it in the plan to have the implementation committee have a consultant?
That'd probably be on a project-by-project basis.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but what I would say is that, like a number of things that we had discussed previously at this meeting and at other meetings as well, when we're talking in terms of master plans and whatever, Raymond is not gray. I understand that. I don't expect that this committee is going to recommend that that the town go out and hire a planning or 3 or 4 planners that are going to set up office and basically do municipal planning for the town of Raymond. That being said, we are big enough and things are getting complex enough, in my opinion, that we need to make the suggestions that in our recommendation in this plan that consultants be looked at and hired based on municipal planning. And as I believe I mentioned at the meeting last week, that's not to cast any aspersions on Sebago Technics and the planning that they do and the consulting they do with the planning board. But as I mentioned last week, my sense is that if you ask Sebago Technics, do you have in-depth knowledge of how to do municipal planning? They'd say, that's not what we do. When we first reached out looking at putting out an RFP for consultants for this committee, I made that suggestion to the town manager. The town manager said, they don't do that. So do we need some sort of assistance? And I'm not advocating adding, 2 or 3 more employees to the town payroll, but I'm saying things like grant writers and services for grant writing that can take place, that can be contracted, or municipal planners that can be consulted in how to set up these, let's say, helping the planning board put together maybe a revision of their design standards, because this is what we want in the flavor of our village area. That those things are things that I believe we're at the point in this town that we need.
Second that.
Okay, so I think we are all in agreement that we like the calling out specific timeframes. I think it sounds like we're all good with the 1 to 2 and the 2 to 4. The only sticky point was the 5+. Do we want to do 5 to 10 years as opposed to 5+?
I
I
Yeah.
don't
think
have
that's
a
a good
problem
cap.
with that. That's fine.
Okay.
And should we say initiation rather than completion?
I would be in favor of that, just to
Okay.
make it clear.
Yeah, I think that's clear.
They're asking us to be as specific as possible
Yep.
without telling them what to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
All right. Let's, I guess, go through these.
Okay, so we're starting in the local Raymond goals. I think the first suggestion was to have this, the assessment of town culverts possibly be a priority action. I don't know if anyone feels strongly about that, or if we just want to have it be.
Right, this is just an assessment. They're not actually going to be repairing anything.
Yeah, that's usually how you have to start with DOT.
When I interviewed basically our Public Works as part of the department head interviews, he made it clear that they do, that they're replacing metal culverts with plastic culverts because they're more sustainable and make sense. But he was clear with me that really, as far as assessments go, they do assessments after the fact, when there's a problem. They go down and go, yeah, that is collapsed. And so I guess it would be a matter of whether we want to be proactive or reactive. And I don't know about the rest of you, but the side of my road on Raymond Hill Road is disappearing. And that's just the reality of things. So is this going to be something that can be addressed in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that should be a priority.
Okay.
That should be a priority.
Actually, budget finance, I think we were just kind of talking about that at our last meeting. It's how do we arm ourselves to kind of protect against potentially more rain and that kind of thing. So I know other committees are also speaking about that.
Okay, great. We will make that a priority. Then we did do the time frame. Peter, I think this was a comment from you to incorporate what looks like federal recommendations for resilient residential construction into existing building codes. So the building code is passed down by the state. Some towns can adopt stricter building codes than what's required by the state. Some places, I think the only place that's done it is maybe Portland and South Portland, have adopted a stricter energy code. Oh, it's good. So that's kind of what I know about this in terms of municipal control.
I would think that when I look at HUD and NAHB recommendations, it's some of the stuff is already embedded in what we've suggested before, such that any new construction should have consideration for underground power. So rather than putting up more poles that get blown over, how about the fact that what we require in any new construction is that you go underground? There is cost associated with that. I understand that. And is it going to make houses more affordable? I don't believe so. But I do believe that in general, all of the things that are incorporated in those recommendations on the federal level also enhance the property value. So, I mean, I don't know that what happens, I do know that if you put a swimming pool in your backyard and you think that's going to increase your property value, my understanding is it doesn't. Because there's more liability associated with it. So you think it's going to increase your property value, it really doesn't. If you're going to put a standby generator in your house, that's going to make you more resilient and weatherproofed. Does that add value to your house? It does generally. So I think it's just a recommendation that maybe if it's not embedded in our building codes, that at least those be standards that are incorporated into the development of ordinances down the road.
And it might not do anything for affordable housing, but it does a lot for maintenance. Having underground power.
If it is too expensive to do that in the short term, maybe we ought to make sure that as they're putting through lines, they aren't putting trees next to those lines. And I've seen that happen.
I do think this would be the most effective in our growth areas where we're going to have a lot of high density. And I think if you had a lot of overhead electrical poles and lines, that would not add to the walkability, the general feel. And I think with that amount of density, you'd be able to average it in over a larger development. But I do understand, like if you're trying to build a single family home and they're making you put in 500 feet of underground utilities,
Not gonna happen.
yeah, that might not work, right? But hopefully that example would fall under infeasible and not feasible, and that's why there's some leeway there.
We could change from all new buildings to all new subdivisions too, if you want to be more specific, but I did want to include commercial development, like in a village. I guess to get to Peter's point about resilient building codes, do we want to look at this something as an ordinance or something as like a point of education?
I think an education makes more sense. We can't mandate that people do things in a smart way. I mean, I think it's educating them that this is the better way to do it.
Well, I would also just add, the building code gets periodically updated, and I believe that the town's building code is getting updated within the next couple of months here to a much more recent version of the building code. And generally those tend to go in one direction, which is more energy efficient and higher costs for generally all construction. So I think naturally over time, we're going to trend that way anyways, just because we're going to continue to periodically adopt the newer version of the building code. I think this one is more specific.
I think we already did.
Right, it just hasn't taken effect yet.
Oh, okay.
I think is.
I don't have a problem with wording it in such a way that it's that information be made available through code enforcement and planning.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked with Alex when we had our interview with him. I mean, and 2017 Energy Code or whatever that was one of the latest. There's
right.
been one since. But for us to try to get in front of that and do something more proactive is way out of our scope of our not our scope but our town's capacity. But to rely on the most recent state energy code would be reasonable and appropriate.
I could see, a goal where you'd have some kind of like educational one-page sheet that when you go into the code office to get your permit, this says like, here's your best practices for weatherization, resilience, weather kind
Education materials.
Permits. Yeah, there's plenty of them. More than we need.
Or maybe, there's even, here's our standard, code that you have to do, but if you wanted to do this, your permit's only, whatever, half the price. If you wanted to go with a more resilient, environmentally friendly, whatever sort of premier way of doing this, is there some incentive that we can provide to people to do that rather than something that's not as
I'm not sure if you can do that with permit fees. I don't think you
Yeah.
can.
No, but
Okay.
along
Good idea.
with what Jackie's saying, though, I mean, information at town hall, maybe the
Yep.
code enforcement officer or planning board or whatever that provides when building permits go out. As far as resiliency, is something like, are you aware that there's a rebate right now on heat pumps? You know, and that would be an energy efficient way to go. So we're just making you aware.
Okay, and so who would be, who's the responsible party here?
If we're talking about education, then it's the code enforcement.
Okay, and then would we put that short term? Medium?
Education's ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah, I think all the educations I put ongoing. Okay, let's see. I think Peter suggested an annual recognition event for town volunteers and committee members. So Peter's throwing a party for everyone, it sounds like.
Well, I will tell you, I attended a party back, I think, at the turn of the last century, and because I was on the zoning board of appeals. It was well attended, and the town sponsored it. I'm not familiar that there has been any event that really shows appreciation from the town for volunteers, and I would say especially if our plea right now is to get more individuals to volunteer in the town, that I'm not talking about a major expensive event, but an evening that the town recognizes all of those in the town that contribute to it would not be out of order at this point.
Annual.
Annual would be nice.
Annual boat cruise on Sebago.
That could be nice.
We've got Tassel Top, it's a nice resource.
We could put something in
Barbecue
here
down
that's a little, that's not completely prescriptive, but just say to coordinate and promote volunteer opportunities and recognize volunteers for their service, something like that.
I do, and you just sort of went over it, but I also put the same comment I think that Peter did for the encourage community members of all ages to participate. That should maybe be ongoing as people
Yep,
come and go.
that sounds
Okay.
good. I think the next one we had from Peter was about the portable radar speed signs.
That seems like a great idea. That could be implemented in a kind of a pilot test approach with, if we could find a couple $1,000 and have it, and put the sign up maybe on 85 somewhere for a while, or some other hot spot where folks are going fast up on other parts of town, and move it around town.
Yeah, I think in short, John, what I was looking to hear was short of contracting the sheriff's department for more hours to move that cruiser around to different hot spots. My experience has been that planting them in one place, what we see what the effect of that is, and that's that people slow down.
It works, yeah.
Because they know it's there. I'm thinking more in terms of picking different areas and locations, and it goes in line with the goal and our vision, and I do like the term traffic quieting. I mean, that's kind of nice. But I know that a reminder for myself, I don't know about anyone else in this room, but when I see too fast, and they actually tell me what the speed is, it's like, wow. I don't know that I'm endorsing that what we need to do at this point is put out more traffic lights with cameras. I mean, we may get there eventually. Maybe just start a rumor that we're doing that would help. But this seemed to be a relatively inexpensive way, short of getting more hours that they may not even have the hours to give us, the sheriff's department, if I understand how things are going in policing these days. But it seemed to me to be a relatively inexpensive fix.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Do we want it to be priority or short term?
I'd vote for priority.
I
I'd
would
vote
as
for
well.
two in town that could be moved around, and we'll find $4,000 somewhere.
I was gonna wait till committee comments to bring this up, but maybe it's the right time to do it. So after my comments on last Wednesday's meeting, a couple of citizens reached out to me and appreciated it very much and asked what else could be done. One of the citizens said they reached out to Maine DOT and unsurprisingly had a very unsatisfactory response. The solution was to put up a 45-mile-an-hour sign on Egypt Road. And just looking for clarification on this, because it's kind of tying back to what you're saying. Hiring a police presence on some of our busier roads, is it just a call to the sheriff's office? I reached out to somebody who has more experience than I do, and I'm told that we are unable to collect income from speeding vehicles. We can only collect income from ticketed vehicles parked on 302 that's overflow from Raymond Beach. Maybe our town manager can help clarify. Are we not receiving income from that? And then if we did want more of a police presence, is it just a call to the sheriff's office? And like Peter said, they may just say, we don't have the help.
Well, we contract with Cumberland County for our police. So they're going from wherever the northern end, I think Naples, down to Harpswell is what the area that they're covering. So
There are some towns
They're
that
here.
contract a sheriff deputy for
Yes.
the town specifically, but that comes at a cost. You obviously pay the sheriff department to have somebody designated to your town. Harrison has a deputy that works in their town. The focus of that one is really speeding and traffic. Obviously, they get calls to service to do other things, but when they're not actively responding to a call, they're kind of expected to be monitoring the traffic in town. And I think it really has made a difference in Harrison. You know, when you're coming up Route 35 from Naples, you know, people know now, like when that 25-mile-per-hour speed zone starts, that's, you know, you're gonna get a ticket or you're gonna get stopped if you go through there. But I think it has to be a concerted effort, and it has to be, like, your town really has to decide, this is what we want the focus of this deputy to be.
Interesting. So is that a petition that comes from?
and we don't have a certain deputy.
We're
that
part of
is-
district.
We're part of the whole district. We're part of a
so-
district, but we aren't, we
Right.
don't contract with any one or two right now.
Right.
It would be an extra expense.
Gray has a specific designated one. Naples has one for the Causeway. Standish has one. So there are towns around us that have a designated sheriff deputy, but they are also understaffed right now.
Yeah, so my comments, budget finance were incorrect because, so we're not receiving any money. It's actually the opposite. We're paying out money.
We're paying,
So
and
it's-
the money from their tickets goes to the state.
Okay. Would that just be a petition if enough people said, I want to see a police presence in Raymond?
Are you asking me or?
He's like, you got a lot of information.
I
but-
mean, my husband was a sheriff deputy with
Okay,
Cumberland
so
County.
Is
so.
that a petition that gets, started to say, how does it get started? Is it enough
I think
people
it would have to come from budget,
We
the
would have
town
to budget for it, and the town would have to
Approve
approve that expense.
I would think that's something that we could discuss in the finance
Okay.
committee meeting.
That's
If
what.
you want to slow down traffic, you got to have sheriff patrolling the roads. Police presence is the only thing that really solves it. If you want to find out, drive through Yarmouth at 2 miles over the speed limit.
I mean, I agree with Frank if we really want to solve that. I mean, the signs are fine and all, but not all of us are like Peter. Some of us are like,
I try to set the high score off.
ignore them. Some people are doing a high score. I complain about their placement. I mean, if you're pegging me when the speed limit's still 50 and it's changing to 35 and you're telling me I'm too fast, well, I ignore that sign. There's one right now on River Road in Wyndham that does that. I drive by it every time I go to soccer, and I ignore it. I mean, that's just my own personal thing because it's telling me I'm going too fast, but I'm still within that certain speed zone. So, I mean, I don't know what their effectiveness is, but maybe our money would be better spent with an actual police presence who's going to make you pay money.
I wonder if you can, I have no idea the answer to this question, but I wonder if the sheriff's department, has signs you can use temporarily?
They may.
I think, because I see them in North Yarmouth sometimes, and they don't have police, and they don't have their own deputy, to my knowledge.
When I
so-
researched this, you actually, they can be leased, rented. You don't have to, the town doesn't have to actually purchase them. Also, from my investigation and to Kayla's point, similar to, and Frank's as well, similar to saying, well, just lobby the MDOT to increase the speed limit. Well, then, they're not obeying the speed limit now, so decreasing it isn't going to really have an effect. My research tells me that these signs aren't effective for some people. They are effective for others. So I guess my sense is just that it's a relatively inexpensive way to try and address what's going on in the town.
It's not about the
It also gives you, the data collection is an important point. So I worked in a town where we put these out because residents had been complaining about speeding. And then after collecting data for a bunch of months, we were able to put speed humps in there because we got the data that said people are in fact
Absolutely,
going 20 miles
and
over.
so it's being proactive. It's not waiting for the MDOT to basically collect data or make a decision or just get tired of too many citizens complaining, but it's actually having some hard data. The one thing I would add to this, and this is, once again, everybody's different, I do like the signs where at the end, when you are obeying it, it says, thank you.
Thank you. Right.
I think it would be a good if we did do the data collection, because if we then are determining that everywhere this is a big problem, that is better justification for the Budget Finance Committee to recommend that we are paying for a devoted police presence.
Yeah, I like it. I like this idea because it gets the people aware, and then if we can get the budget for the sheriff, then it's not like just a sheriff appeared out of nowhere. It's like,
Right.
hey, we're taking some steps to.
Test it out.
Here's
Yeah.
the data.
Yeah, I like
to
that. I
back it
think they
up.
go hand in hand, so we'll definitely beat the budget.
Great.
Okay.
Let's see, anything else in here?
So all that boils down to a priority for the implementation committee, or are we going to do
Yes,
something
that was a
sooner than that?
priority.
I think we'll mark that a priority action, but you're allowed to do these things before the comp plan gets passed. So if Budget Finance has some money and wants to rent some like tomorrow, that's also fine. Then you can just, when the comp plan is approved, you can just say, we already did that.
Cool. Advantage on being on two committees, right?
So I think Peter recommended a community committee involved in the reuse of the Jordan Small Middle School. I think that's a good point. I think we can just adjust the language on this goal that says develop a master plan, in partnership with the community for the reuse of the middle school.
Can we say repurpose? I know it's not a huge thing, but can we say repurpose of Jordan Small
Yeah.
Middle School?
And I would tell you that there is already a committee that has been formed in Wyndham, because they also are going to have a building that's freed up when the new school is built. So I guess I'd just say it's not too soon for us to be thinking about this. Wyndham's already doing it.
And then I see create an a community event calendar and call for volunteers. So is there, there's currently a town calendar on the website?
Yes.
Yes. So can you tell us a little more about the event calendar?
It's not
Is that
my
not you? Oh, okay.
surprise.
So I don't know who wrote this. Did anyone write this? Okay, well, I guess we're good then. Yeah, I think there were just some people made some notes on the edits. Let's see if
State
I think that's subdivision. Peter, was there anything else on your list that we haven't brought up?
So many, it's hard to remember. I
There's-
think what I was redirecting a lot of when I'm saying the Budget Finance Committee, it occurs to me that in the last year or so, the Budget Finance Committee's become more active in the town. And so when it comes to capital investment, capital improvement plans and the like, that it would just make sense that they would also be involved. It's never lost on me that there are only 2 elected bodies in the town of Raymond, and it's the Select Board and the Budget Finance Committee. So the people actually elect those individuals.
Yep, so those are all good edits. We will, add those to the responsible party. I think that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's what we had for outstanding edits to this, unless anyone else has any more.
I had just Peter, what you'd said earlier about just clarifying to make sure people know exactly what that the implementation plan knows exactly what we're looking at. There's that one point on ranking solar sites, and it says, and I just keep reading it and thinking that we should include if appropriate, because it sounds like all land may be appropriate for solar sites, and it may be that some parcels are not appropriate, and so as opposed to having the most appropriate
We can just
land.
take out most there. I think would, right?
I think that edit was in response to a discussion, I believe, at the Select Board meeting, where there was, I believe, at least one individual that was concerned as far as, well, I own property. It's not really abutting in a lake. So, but what I'm going to be left out of that if I want to participate in it. Right. And so it was, and my thought was that if there is a site specific criteria that could be applied across the board, certainly it's going to involve zoning and planning as well. But that if somehow there's a criteria developed to look at, that it's not just necessarily involving the lakes, right, or the like. I do know that right now there's pushback from the state because the state has recently come out with ordinances that really says that there's going to have to be specific limitations on solar farms greater than 20 acres, right, if it's deemed to be in essential farmland. And what they haven't come up with just yet is what the definition of essential farmland is. I think we've looked at that a little bit in the future land use as far as identifying areas in town for agriculture and the like. And boy, I heard an interview from one farmer, and she made a good point, which was basically, so this is kind of prohibitive for me because, I've got 120 acres. And what I've been able to do is keep that farm because I dedicated 20 acres to a solar farm. Yep. And so to sacrifice 20 acres of farmland in order to save 100 more acres of farmland, because otherwise I'm going to have to sell it and it'll be developed. She made a good point, but right now that's basically what the state statute is saying. So I think that there has to be some reasonable way to have a criteria for any place. Certainly zoning is going to say, well, you can't do it here, you can't do it there. But unless we have a very, very detailed and comprehensive, detailed description of zoning in general and zoning out solar farms altogether, then it's going to cause some people some amount of issues. So make it such that there's a general criteria that goes across the board. And so that the site selection is going to be something where certainly an ordinance that says there's got to be a certain amount of buffer for any of these commercial activities if they're bumping right up against a residential zone. It has to be considered.
So how about, I've been thinking about what you said, Danelle, about the language in here. What if we changed it to develop a process to determine if sites to determine how appropriate sites in Raymond are for solar development and incorporate that into the standards? Is that better than, does that make it more clear?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Peter that there's got to be a criteria, and that the way that I was reading, the way it came across is just that every parcel
I see.
has the opportunity for solar development, and it's just whether it's ranked high or low. And so I just didn't want that to come across the wrong way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to language such that it basically is saying what Danelle's saying.
Yeah.
But
Well,
right,
thanks.
the other day, it's shoreline zone and rural residential, right? That the
That's
new
right.
ordinance prohibits. So we're assuming those stay in place.
That's probably half of the town.
That's a fair amount of the town, yeah. And then this would apply to the remaining rural areas where utility scale project could go in, like is proposed up the hill
Senior
here.
animated as ourselves.
Okay. Do you have anything?
No, I'm fine.
Any other comments? All right, I'm seeing none. All right. Melanie, we do not have a public. Is that correct? On Zoom? I'm sorry, Melanie, I didn't see a public. No, okay.
Excuse me, Kayla, I did have one note just that I had not had an opportunity to add to this, so I'll just run this by individuals here in the committee and just see what you think about it, because this was a conversation last Wednesday. Under goals, policies, and strategies, do we want to say anything about, and this is just the language I came up with, but it could certainly be changed, the community should better track short-term rentals and create standards that allow them to operate. And the responsible parties would be the select board, planning board, and the time frame would be medium 2 to 4 years. So I know that that's, once again, this would be one of those controversial issues that I talked about before. Recently, it's been voted down in a couple of communities by very close votes, but votes nonetheless. I came across this question when we had our review last month, which was talking about the estimate of 6% of short-term rentals in the town. And when I asked how did we arrive at that, what the answer I got was, well, by surveying, where there's surveying websites like Verbo or Airbnb, and what's actually out there on the internet to be rented in Raymond. And while that, I agree, is probably a good way to arrive at an estimate, ultimately what I said on Wednesday was it's really a guesstimate. We don't know, and that there are certainly a number of individuals, I would think, in the town that aren't going through Airbnb or Verbo. They're basically the word of mouth, or they just know people that they've been renting to for years, and then the relatives of those people or the friends of those people, then they rent it. And so I'm just wondering what the committee thinks as far as saying anything about a way for the community to better track short-term rentals. And I'm not saying necessarily one thing or another has to be done. I'd leave that up to the implementation committee. So if what they want to do is license these individuals, or even just have a listing where they have to list with the town, the owner, where the contact information is for that owner. If an abutter has an issue and they call the town can know very quickly who to contact, who owns it, and is responsible for it. And as far as defining what a short-term rental is, I know this committee's talked about it, and when I researched it, it was all over the place. But basically what the state, and I believe for taxation in general, it's like 30 days. So a short-term rental generally is less than 30 days. And so I just throw that out there. Sorry, I should have said that before. Any appetite for that?
I think it makes sense to address short-term rentals in some capacity in the plan, whether it's a short-term or a long-term goal, because I think by the next time we roll around with this comp plan, they're going to be much more significant. They're not going anywhere. It's the way people want to stay in regions like we have, and I think we've got to give ourselves an opportunity to discuss it further and decide what we want to do as a town. I wouldn't want to lose that chance now.
I think the planning board has insulated us pretty well by the recent change as far as saying that as far as accessory dwelling units in the shorelands have to be 600 feet, whereas the state says 250 feet. So we're using our opportunity as a town to say we can be in excess of the state. And I think that does, in a way, if I heard the discussion correctly at the planning board, was, you know, someone who's going to be looking at this as a short-term rental in the shorelands, and I'm going to have, you know, it's going to be a party house where I'm going to have, you know, 19 of my college buddies all cram into this 1,250-foot square foot building and raise hell. That's going to be less attractive if they're going to be 600 feet from the shoreline. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't do it, but they'd have to be separated or back from the shoreline at least 600 feet. So I think that was a step that the planning board took to try and insulate us from it. But that being said, and I heard the code enforcement officer say it last Wednesday, that one of the pluses about accessory dwelling units is it allows the landowner to actually build a 1,250 square foot building, which we have just recently. We increased last June from 600 feet to 700 feet to 1,250 feet, which makes it basically small, but it's a 2-bedroom. And how does that affect ADUs in general? I mean, are they available for short-term rentals everywhere? Right now, there's nothing that prohibits them in the town of Raymond. So are we going to see more in the way of short-term rental activity involving accessory dwelling units? And do we want to have something started to at least look at that to say where would those be appropriate, where aren't they appropriate, and that sort of thing?
So you're saying, your suggestion, Peter, is simply a registry?
Something that, I guess, from the very start, it would just be, we're not dealing with a guesstimate.
Yeah,
You know, what
right.
we're doing is, we're saying, you know, it's not 6% of the housing in Raymond, it's 12% of the housing in Raymond. So at least we have a starting point. It's kind of like getting the data from
Yeah,
the radar
right.
signs. It's
Right.
a starting point.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead, John.
So I'm kind of like you in a lot of ways. I'm into the smaller government, you know, and we start kind of regulating too much. And I understand the purpose of it, but just if the whole goal was just to see how many short-term rentals are out there, it doesn't really do it. It's a data thing. It's not probably worth code enforcement's time or however it works out to have to regulate them as far as them registering and everything. So I think the timing, like you were saying, makes sense because 10 years rolls around and this may look very different, just like 10 years ago, it looks very different than it does today. So it's also kind of hard to say, like, okay, well, say you have an ADU on your property and you're renting that out short term, but you're using your house full-time residence, or vice versa. It gets a little bit hard. So I was saying, like, so property 123 Main Street, half of it's a short-term rental and the other half it's not, you know, just, I think with this ADU thing, I think it's going to cause a little bit more confusion than is worth actually collecting data. It's kind of my thoughts. So I think I said this last time, hometown New Jersey, short-term rentals and yearly leases had to get a CO, and you had to pay for that, so it's income for the town. But it just was, I don't know, I think it's too, I don't know, I think it's regulating them at this time, or at least registering, I should say, at this time, I don't think it's probably worth our time at this time.
I would say that my concerns are, number one, there was a discussion on Wednesday night about looking at other revenue-generating sources other than property taxes for the town of Raymond. And so that includes looking at things like grants and programs and the like. This would be something also, as you mentioned, Sean, could potentially be a revenue generator. Does it put a burden on someone that wants to rent out their ADU or live in their ADU and rent out their primary residence? that they have to pay a fee? Yes, it does. But ultimately, it's it's a revenue generator for them as well. So would it be reasonable in vacation land to have some sort of revenue line that's coming in from someone who is basically having a business that's generating revenue for them? So that'd be my first question. The other, or reason to say we should look at it. The other one is, and I've heard this discussion when I did my interview with the fire chief. By having some tracking mechanism, some licensing, then at least there's some way to enforce or have surveillance for those 19 college buddies that are crammed into a 2-bedroom, 1,250-foot structure, because that's a life safety issue. And is there some way, and I believe what the fire chief was saying, and I believe it was discussed in the planning board as well, is that some placard that's on that says approved residents, 6 individuals, and then have some way to be able to enforce that, because it becomes a life safety issue when you have, twice as many occupants in a building that the fire code would allow. So that was my thinking on it.
Can I make a suggestion, Peter? Maybe we can have a goal in here. So basically, I think there are some towns that are moving towards at least having people register or just have, register their short-term rentals so the town has a better idea of who's living there, what's going on. I've also seen some towns that have huge summer populations, have really controversial fights and then vote down the idea of a rental registry. So I think it probably needs to be a town conversation, not just a comp plan committee conversation. So maybe we put an action item in here that is really, instead of saying do this, we could say like have a town,
Have the implementation committee test it out.
Yeah, bring it to the town.
Look at possibilities.
Look at possibly registering.
And let them put it to some thinking.
Explore whether the
Explore,
town
yeah.
would
Yeah,
like
I
to.
think, yeah.
It's
Put on people.
sort of
It's
regulate
bigger than-
short-term rentals in any way.
Register or regulate.
Register or
Yeah.
regulate
I would
in
just
any way.
I would just add this, that there was an issue over a year ago where a group of people came to the select board and brought this issue to them, and the decision was of the select board at that time, well, we're not going to take any action on this right now. I understand that. It is a controversial issue. I will also tell you that I got the idea for adding this because an individual on one of the committees at the end of Wednesday night came up to me and said, I already have a large group of citizens in the town that want to see more in the way of regulation of short-term rentals, and we're working on it. So I just throw that out there.
Can I ask real quick what towns you feel are looking to implement or at least rumor to? Just kind of curious.
South Portland.
Yeah, so South Portland's thinking about it. Portland, you have to register them. They regulate them as well. There are some other towns, like I know Topsom and Brunswick have had conversations about registering rental units in general.
I feel like Rockland does.
I think Rockland,
For
yeah,
some
that
reason,
sounds
I feel
right.
like Rockland does that.
Portland
Yeah,
just recently reduced the number.
Yeah, so
permits.
there are a lot of other towns that just have you, towns with a lot of rental properties, like when you look out towards like Lisbon, Lewiston, Auburn, they have some more rental registration requirements, which is more about code enforcement. So it's not, just registering is not necessarily onerous. It's really just so the town knows how properties are being used. But again, it was, I think, it was one of our colleagues in Booth Bay Harbor saw that a huge group of people came forward because they have a lot of short-term rentals there, you can imagine. Really passionate that they needed to do it, and then it kind of went down in flames. So.
No, I have no doubt that it would be controversial. I guess the last thing I'd say is this: the data I looked at suggests that unregulated short-term rentals drives up the cost of rental fees in general in the community. So if we're talking about big A affordability, what the data suggests is that unregulated or too many short-term rentals drive up the cost of rental in general in a community.
I think it also allows people to stay in the homes that they can't afford anymore, too. You know, my retired parents use it as a passive income,
Yeah.
so it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Interesting. You said Portland is, you said Portland's reducing
Portland,
that
I think
number.
they had 400 permits, and then they reduced it to 250.
Portland, I think, is the only place in the state that limits the number of short-term rentals.
I thought in South Portland, it had to be an owner-occupied property. So you can't just rent out the whole place. Somebody
be
has
there.
to be there that lives
Yeah.
there, I think.
Okay, well, I think it's worth putting in there that we'd like to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. Any language that basically suggests the implementation committee should be addressing some form or tracking mechanism, I'll be happy.
And to add to that, before Alex got done, he told me if the town had its own police force, that would have solved a lot of problems in Raymond. That's what he commented to me. So it might be something to add in the comp plan to consider. How, if we had our own police officer, it might make a difference. Maybe there are other towns that have experience with that. I don't know.
Well, I think we explored that maybe a decade or so ago, and at that time it was, my understanding was found that it wouldn't be cost effective. You'd need 2 cruisers and at least 2 full-time policemen. And the argument at that point in time was the fact that the topography of Raymond is such that, you know, if the residents are thinking that a full-time police force is going to necessarily recover their stolen property, it's going to take just as long as the sheriff's department to get there, because you've got to go over a hill and pass 2 lakes. But once again, that was a while ago that was studied, and why not look at it again?
Well, I was just offering information. So.
Okay. I think, are we good?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. So I don't see any public, so public comment does not need to happen. Do we have any comprehensive plan committee comment tonight? Peter?
Surprise. Just in Wyndham Eagle this week, I'll just read this just informationally. Reimagining the Gray Village. 2 years ago, the Gray Town Council hired Principal Group, an urban design, development, architecture, and planning firm to help residents reimagine a gray village that works for pedestrians, bicyclists, residents, and businesses, as well as motorists. Principal Group came up with a new design plan. The plan calls for shorter, safer crossroads, new and rebuilt sidewalks, bike lanes, street trees, and traffic calming measures, such as narrower traveling lanes for cars, slower posted speed limits, and village-appropriate signs. The target area includes Main Street from Wayne Avenue to the Yarmouth Road, Route 100, West Gray Road intersection, as well as a major construction work on Yarmouth Road from Main Street to Hillcrest Drive. Once the initial design phase is complete, the Maine DOT will apply on the town's behalf to the U.S. Department of Transportation RAISE grant program, which, if successful, would help fund what is being called the Village Transformation Project. I read this only not in any way trying to suggest that we are Gray, any more than we are Wyndham or South Portland. But I believe Portland got a grant from this RAISE organization, federally funded organization, for something in the tune of $12 million as far as improving traffic control, sidewalks, bike lanes, walking paths, and I'm not once again suggesting that that's something that Raymond is going to get. I just bring this up because as I was reading this, I'm saying, where have I heard this? This sounds awful familiar to me. So just for the committee to be aware, if you haven't, and just look in the Wyndham Eagle, it's right there. Maybe it was the Lakes region. But anyway, that's my only comment.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else?
For the next meeting, can we have one of the agenda items be planning for the November election? Just thinking about dates. And what community outreach or engagement we want to plan for.
I believe the initial scope included doing another video to promote the plan, so you have a month to think about who wants to be on film.
Okay.
Should we also add in maybe a Halloween activity or event or awareness raising opportunity?
Main Street, you mean? That's a good idea.
Come check out our scary conference.
Someone can dress up like a growth area.
That'd be funny.
Get beaten with a stick.
So our next meeting date is October 2nd, so we can brainstorm some ideas about Halloween. All right. Considering the time, I would like to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a
Move to
motion?
adjourn.
Thank you, and a second.
Second.
All right, thank you, and all in favor? We are adjourned.